where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Bryan from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast, your weekly podcast on all things cybersecurity. I'm Bryan Hornung, here with my co-hosts, Reginald Andre, Randy Bryan. How are you both doing today?
Doing good.
Doing great, man. How are you?
Doing well, man. Feeling good.
Your new haircut's looking great.
Dude, that's a whole other story in itself. You didn't even bring that up in the green room.
I didn't notice till just now. I'm like,
it's so funny because everybody who says it to me now, because I went and got my haircut last week, and like I look up and the lady took off all my hair. Like I was trying to grow it out, and it's gone now. So starting over, unfortunately, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it. It was like done, and there was like, oh, okay, great, thanks for cutting all my hair off. She's like, oh, you didn't want that much off? I'm like, not really, but it is what it is.
Good stuff.
Yes, sir. So, guys, all right, we have an important lineup today. We're going to cover this major Ascension healthcare ransomware incident. We're going to talk about the rise of Ransomware-as-a-Service and CISA's advisory around a particular Ransomware-as-a-Service group. We're going to get into a little bit about Zero Trust and how that's a big time solution that you can start to implement in your business to help with all of this stuff around conversations around whether you should have cyber insurance or not as well are going to happen today around certain events that happened and information that we have that you may want to take a look at if you don't have it, whether you should have it or not. We'll get into that a little bit today. And we're going to talk about some of these ransomware attacks in Wichita, Kansas. Where is it in Georgia, Randy, that got hit? I just have Georgia County.
Yeah, it was a Georgia county of. Yeah, I just have Georgia County.
All right, that's all.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. So some Georgia County, we'll figure that out when we get there. I don't have it in front of me right now. Then just a follow-up on the Montclair, New Jersey ransomware attack and proof that the stuff we talk about on this show actually does happen and plays out like we say it does. So we're going to go into what the officials from Montclair, New Jersey are talking about when it came to their ransomware attack that happened last year. So, guys, let's just jump right into our first topic for today, which is the ransomware attack on Ascension Healthcare. Cyber criminals managed to divert payments and all kinds of stuff intended for Ascension, and all kinds of things are going on at Ascension. And this seems like a really, really bad event for this group. What's happening with this Ascension Healthcare ransomware attack? Who wants to take it?
Well, I'll start off just in case you don't know who they are. They have 140 hospitals throughout the U.S.
Yep.
And they have 14 states in particular. And I was looking at Twitter. I'm not going to say X. I'm going to say Twitter. And I was looking at Twitter and just people, patients that are really concerned where they're going in and, normally, I don't want to say in and out, but how usually hospitals are efficient. Everything is taking much longer. Everybody's frustrated as far as the patients and, of course, the nurses and hospital staff. So it's a really big nightmare that we continue to see in the hospital world.
Yeah, apparently they are in downtime protocol mode.
Yep.
So at least they have a contingency plan for when their systems are down. And there are reports of people that are going, and there's frustration. People are scrambling, but they're still getting care. There are reports of that.
In some places, in other places, they're diverting. And the other interesting thing about this one, guys, is that the EHR, the electronic health record system, is unavailable. So they got they got in deep, as we say in the business. They got in deep. You know, sometimes we see these attacks on healthcare facilities and they don't get to the EHR. They got to the EHR here, which kind of tells us they got in deep because everything else is also shut down.
And they also got into the charts software that they use, which allows patients to communicate with the doctors. So that's a real mess.
Yeah, it seems like they are still trying to get a handle on just the response piece of this. From what we can see, it seems like they're still trying to get kind of like a net over the problem. Because as you said, they're getting into all different kinds of places. And we know as soon as they do these types of things, they start running their scams and they start doing all kinds of things to try to trick patients and other people so they can affect as many people as they can through this type of event. It's not just this company that's going to be attacked. It's going to be their patients as well who are going to be, you know, targeted in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and you know, I think it was 2022 when the administration put a red line of different industries and categories of type of businesses that was kind of a red line saying, you know, don't touch these, like telling the hackers and cyber attackers not to touch this. And, you know, FBI, CISA, everybody has been saying hospitals are under attack, be careful. So this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that always comes back to mind, Andre, when these things happen, because I remember that, you know, red line in the sand or whatever you want to call it, and an agreement that we're not going to attack critical, like all three of us, like as much as we would love that and would support it, I think we all pretty much laughed out loud when we read that, thinking this isn't going to stop anybody. And it hasn't, you know, now it's not even brought up anymore, you know? So, wow. Good point.
So let's dig into, you know, we've talked about on this show a million times, this whole concept of ransomware as a service, the, you know, cyber criminals' way of, you know, building efficiencies in their, you know, criminal enterprises, making it easier for them to make money, you know, do what they do best, which is deploy ransomware while they let other cyber criminals do things like break into networks and, you know, do all the phishing campaigns that, you know, lead to ransomware. But these are very segregated skill sets. It's not one person, as we're going to learn, as Montclair, New Jersey, you know, has come out and said, like, hey, this is a well-run organization. These are companies. They have support. They have layers of employees. There's different people that you deal with. It's not just one guy sitting behind a keyboard collecting all this money and doing all this work. And I think that sometimes that's the belief of what's going on out there. They don't understand. Businesses don't understand what they're up against, right? And what they're up against is, we see CISA, we see the FBI release these bulletins on these ransomware as a service groups, right? And now, interestingly enough, coincidence or not, we can talk about that, guys. Right after this Ascension attack, we have CISA releasing this advisory on this Black Basta group, which we've mentioned tons of times on this show. And basically, the government agencies warn that Black Basta ransomware gang is targeting the healthcare industry and 12 of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So last Friday, they issued an advisory from FBI, CISA, and DHS, Department of Health, saying Black Basta has attacked at least 500 organizations globally in the last 2 years. Coincidence, guys, or do you think that CISA and FBI are getting ahead of what they're seeing at Ascension to try to warn other hospitals that, you know, it could happen to them too? So be on the lookout.
No coincidence. They're basically telling them, hey, this is it, you know, flat out.
What makes you think that?
Well, the fact that this is happening right now, and then they put that out, and
Gotcha.
they're warning the U.S. hospitals.
Gotcha. Okay.
I wanted to just point out for a
Yeah.
second. I googled the 16. You can hear me, okay?
Yeah. Okay, great
Okay,
now.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I wanted to just point out that I don't know the 12 of the 16, but I just wanted to point out the 16 critical sectors because I was just curious on that. So we have chemical sector, commercial facilities, that's like stadiums,
Mhm.
communication sectors, defense, dams, critical manufacturing, emergency services, energy sector, financial, healthcare, government, food and agriculture, information technology, nuclear reactors, materials, and the transportation and water system. Like that is, and so
Pretty much,
obviously the
it's
hospital.
pretty much everything except for like retail stores.
Yeah, but I mean, like, okay, hospitals is one thing, but some of these other things would be like disastrous if, like, the water system, like if they got into the water system or just got the systems to stop working, like I don't want to say we're done, but
Which
it's
is
not.
why we made such a big deal a few weeks ago about the CISA hack and all the
Mhm,
information that was stolen in there because they basically stole risk assessments, and you know what's in a risk assessment
mhm, mhm.
on entities in those sectors that you rattled off.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say out of this list, like the probably healthcare and transportation are probably like the weakest, the like the ones where it's not going to affect everybody because you have to go to the hospital if you need it, but like obviously something like water everybody needs. So wait till they get into those, then we're really going to be feeling it.
There's been a ton of warnings about that. They got into a few. We've covered a few that they got into of the water
Yeah, yeah,
places.
yeah.
Yeah, I think this one's really interesting because pretty sure these guys came out of Conti, which got shut down, and I think had data leaks or breaches against them. And coming back up like this with ransomware-as-a-service, ransomware-as-a-service allows this particular industry, quote unquote, if you will, to grow at scale. And I was even reading in the CISA alert, they mentioned that your initial note you get doesn't say the ransomware. It gives you a link and a code. And then you go there and you talk about your ransomware payment fee. And then also this particular group really focuses on the whole double extortion, which that's pretty much not really news anymore, at least for us. We've mentioned it probably 100 times, but basically how they'll ransom your data and exfiltrate it, which means they take it off site, they post proof of life on the on the dark web, if you will. So then if you don't pay the ransomware, they'll sell your data out to the public. And like in the case of a hospital, that data is pure gold for criminals to be able to have information about you that they can use AI to craft, more sneaky emails that you're more likely to click on, it's pure gold to the criminals.
You mentioned AI. We'll have to get into that towards the end of the show if we have time, and what that means for the future of kind of things like you said, scams and identity theft.
Mm-hmm.
So, anything else out of this CISA advisory that caught your guys' attention or caught your eye? Essentially, covers initial access, how they get in, how they move across, what they're kind of seeing, the basic steps, right? So, if ultimately at the end of the day, how can organizations defend themselves against an organization like Black Bastard? What are some things organizations should definitely be doing? Some of the things that come to mind to me off the top of my head are, make sure you have robust backups, because that's really how you're going to save yourself if you have to go up against this group, right? Make sure that they're immutable. Make sure that you can't access them from the current network that these guys are on, and make sure that they work, right? I don't know if you guys have seen the horror stories that I've been seeing in some of the groups that we're a part of, where people are saying that a certain popular backup products, when they're going to do restoration, they're learning that these backups are not restoring properly or not restoring at all. And while in the past there may have been fixes and workarounds for these types of things, it's being reported that there isn't. And this just happened. I saw something with Google the other day too, guys, where Google lost a bunch of data for a big retirement fund, and there were no backups. So, this is why we talk about not just doing backups, right? Making sure that it's a robust solution, and a robust solution means that, it's off-site, it's immutable, and somebody's testing it on a regular basis, and it works. There's no surprises when Black Basta hits.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And you also, even if you have backups, you already alluded to this or mentioned it, they definitely need to be tested so you can be sure that they are there. But then also backups don't really, if your data is exfiltrated, your backups don't really take care of that. So you were asking what can people do? So definitely backups. I do know that Black Basta mentions in the release, they mentioned that Black Basta often uses vulnerabilities. And so most vulnerabilities, or a lot of vulnerabilities, can be taken care of with patching, which I like to call the unsexiest of all of the cybersecurity things, because it is, but you need it. And then they mentioned emails. And one of the things you can do with emails, not only having good software that's categorizing emails into friendly and unfriendly, but also, having trained people actually read emails. We all kind of seem to hate training, but it really does work. It really makes people slow down and be careful about what they're clicking on. I mean, I don't want to give away all the whole farm, because probably Andre wants to add some. So I'll stop there and let Andre add some if he wants to, or Bryan.
Well, the interesting thing that you're saying is, we're not talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars, to get a shiny toy. We're talking about basic things, making sure that your stuff is patched, making sure that your users are trained, and they're not just, watching a video for 2 minutes and okay, we did our, awareness training for the quarter and let's move on. As we're going to see in some of these other articles, it's like the way these places are getting broken into, it's like, just lock the doors. Nothing. We don't need. Yes, you still need that the sophisticated system, but get back to the basics on many of these things, and you won't get compromised. That's easy.
Yeah, the basics are what organizations fail to do in most cases when these attacks are analyzed. But they're also the thing that, most CEOs and most CFOs are either lying about, or they're in complete denial that they're doing things the right way, because the basics are not being done yet. You talk to most people out there and they think that, they don't need to do anything, or they're good. And companies wouldn't be getting hacked if they were good. And, this happened. I was talking to somebody last week about their company that they worked at got hacked, and they're dealing with 2.5 years after the fact. They're dealing with major identity theft issues and now they've been dealing with these problems and these things that keep rearing their ugly head on this person, because all of their information got stolen, along with and they're not the only employee who has this problem. So all of these employees, a lot of them are former employees at this point, are all kind of banding together in a Facebook group where they're trying to figure out if they're going to go and sue this employer now for this data breach, because all of this information is out there, and they're dealing with these problems now. And it's kind of what I've been saying all year, that like people are going to start dealing with problems like identity theft and other kinds of fraud against them personally because of all these companies getting hacked. And it's going to start with employers getting pissed off at their, or employees getting pissed off at their employer, but eventually it's going to be customers getting pissed off at their the people that they do business with. And we're hearing stories of it all the time where customers, there's a huge law firm that we know about that lost a major client because they got hacked. And what that resulted in was that resulted in them losing their 2 top clients, because the one they lost because they couldn't actually do the work for the court case because they were dealing with a ransomware event. And the other one they lost just because they were breached. So they lost 2 major clients because of the data breach, which caused them to start having to lay off hundreds of lawyers and other law firm staff at this law firm because of this cyber attack. And people don't think that this stuff happens. People don't think, like, if my company gets cyber attacked, we're going to have clients walk out the door and leave us because we were breached. Like, it didn't, like, I guess the thought process is for a lot of business leaders is that if the breach doesn't impact them, why would they leave us? Right. And I think that's changing. I think people's mindsets are starting to change around whether they're going to work for a company or do business with a company who's had a data breach. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I know, Randy, over in Texas, you guys have the wall of shame of companies that have been breached. But like, I mean, I know it's never going to happen, especially with the federal government. But there's got to be something like nationwide where it's like, you get reimbursed, like, got to obviously hit the company where it hurts, either through publicity or through every time there's a data breach in this, email comes, like my email or my information comes up and it's tied because of data breach at XYZ company, we get reimbursed after all the lawyer fees. We get reimbursed a sizable amount, because we have to now take time to now watch our credit score and fight all of these things that's happening. But like until these corporations, it hits their pockets, because I don't think we're going to be talking about the one, Randy, where you mentioned that they didn't have insurance, they were self-insured, but they made they lost over, they're going to lose about $1 billion of revenue, but then that incident cost them $1 billion, but they're still going to be making $6 billion that quarter, so they're still okay in that aspect, right? But it's just got to hit their pockets, in my opinion.
Right. But nobody, and that's my point though. Nobody's sitting here advising these companies that 2-3 years after your breach, you're going to have 1,000 or 2,000 employees band together and come after you for what's been going on. Right. This is all new territory that companies are going to have to weigh as risk. And that's what I keep pounding the drum on this show and on my own YouTube channel, is that things are changing. Times are changing all the time with this, but things are really starting to change when it comes to regulation and laws and what you're going to be held responsible for. And gone are the days of you not being held accountable when your company has millions or thousands of records exposed, and it causes people harm down the road. And we've said it on this show a million times. These identity theft things, these breaches that happen today, it's going to be a year or 2 before it starts to impact individuals. And the more information they have, the more successful they're going to be. It's stealing your identity. Go ahead, Randy.
Oh, no. I wasn't trying to chime in.
Oh, you weren't? All right. Thought you were. So any other thoughts, guys, on what businesses can do? Do you guys think things like zero trust are really going to be what businesses are going to have to embrace at different levels in their cybersecurity in order to combat this? Or do you think that that's not ever going to be embraced? Because zero trust is kind of like looked at by a lot of different entities. I know the insurance world looks at zero trust as like kind of like the gold standard right now. If you really don't want to have a cyber attack, right? But there's from the enterprise's perspective, there's challenges in rolling out zero trust. It's not the cheapest thing in the world to do. So do you think it's a feasible thing that we see innovation and R&D go into tools that achieve zero trust and make it easier? Like, do you see AI coming into play with helping with the deployment of zero trust across the enterprise? Thoughts?
I mean, you said zero trust is not cheap, but at least for me, it's cheap. Now, it may be not. The tool may be inexpensive.
You're talking
but
about one piece of zero trust.
Yeah. You're talking about across the board, because I think it's going to be the convenience, the factor, and the supporting factor of
right. So
I'm trying to do
about
this.
Zero trust at every layer. So
you're
talking about process zero trust on the endpoint with software and things like that, right? But you also have network zero trust that you have to consider and things like that. So
I just don't see why they wouldn't want to do that. Like, that should be like, if I'm like,
that's why I mentioned to you the tool I mentioned to you when we were having our conversation earlier this morning.
Yeah,
that's why I mentioned that to you, because that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do that to keep your job and to keep the company you're working for safe.
And at the very minimum, I would say, Bryan, every company needs to do like a zero trust mind map, if you will, of how do we implement zero trust across the board, and then start to evaluate each part of that. How can I get the most gains with the least amount of pain, with the most bang for my buck, and roll it out? I mean, it sounds so cliche, and I say it all the time, but it really is cybersecurity 101. I mean, zero trust is as simple, parts of it are as simple as saying who gets access to what data, and only having people only have access if they have access. No one else has access. There's a lot of things like that. So I would say it's got to be evaluated. It's got to be mapped out. And then you have to then start to evaluate. And then you also need to do a risk versus cost analysis, because it might cost you $400 per user or something like that, but the risk might be a 10 grand per user. Do you know what I'm saying? There's that risk cost analysis has to happen too.
Are any of you guys old Novell guys? You're probably too young for a Novell. Oh, no, Randy, you're not. You know
books about it, but that was it.
You a Novell guy, Randy? You ever?
Oh, no. Yeah, I never like I came from an IBM family, man.
The interesting thing about Novell is like Novell was built on a zero trust architecture. So the funny thing is like we wouldn't even be talking about this from a network standpoint if Novell won out, but they didn't.
If they would have won the wars,
right?
Yep.
Because what won out? More convenience and basically allow everything and
great point.
Deny, right? That won out, because that was looked at as the faster, the quicker way to get there, right? When you're doing deployments. And now you're looking back, now you have this cybersecurity challenge and it's probably exponentially worse because of that technology winning out over something like Novell. So it's amazing, if you know the history of IT and how you look at how things played out and what manufacturers won over others in the early days, for infrastructure. And that's where we're at today. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that's such a great point. And, you mentioned the cybersecurity challenge. And I know in your mind, it's not just some tiny little thing, but literally I was thinking about this today. We always have all these movies about creating some AI like robot that like destroys us all or whatever. And it's like this cybersecurity challenge that you mentioned, we've created with the internet and an open network. What we've created with that is this potential to like bring it all to the ground. You know what I mean? And it's almost like we're in this what is it, like an arms race over this open network that has now gone from, like went all the way back to Novell. And we're like, no, Novell, you're too much of a pain in the butt. Let's take this open network. Hey, let's make this open network worldwide. And then people can just access everybody. And now look at the mess that we're in because of it. That's a great point that you brought up.
So let's move into our last group of topics, which is just these ransomware attacks, two going on that we're aware of, one in Wichita, one in a county in a to-be named county in Georgia.
Macon Bibb.
Lincoln Bibb?
No, Macon. Macon.
And then we're going to do just this follow-up on Montclair because there was some interesting quotes that we saw in there that we wanted to kind of bring to everyone's attention. So Wichita, they faced a significant ransomware attack that encrypted their systems, leading to a shutdown of their computer network. It affected several city services that required first responders to switch to backup procedures. The city said it's currently working with federal and local law enforcement to investigate the incident, restore services. And what's going on in Macon? Who's got that story? Because I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry. So somebody else is going to have to read that if they got it.
Give me about 30 seconds.
Yep, I got it.
Go.
So they're about 85 miles southeast of Atlanta. Macon Bibb sounds very country. And they released a notice that their network is offline. As of Monday, people can't access their emails, or workers, I should say. Workers of the county can't access their emails or landline phones.
There's that abundance of caution. They took their network offline because they had a breach over the weekend. 150,000 residents. So, I mean, like between this county and Wichita, I think it's 400,000. So you got about 500,000 people now in, critical infrastructure sector,
That's interesting, though, their landline phone, hey, let's go pull out the old RJ45, take out all the fax lines. So that was interesting.
So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Wichita or Macon Bibb ends up paying the ransom. And that's the interesting thing. I mean, because we have this story here with Montclair, New Jersey, right, where I'm pretty sure they paid the ransom, and they ended up paying the ransom. And I think, if I remember correctly in the story, they didn't get their files back. But there's a lot of interesting quotes in this article from, government officials, non-technical people, right? So talking to the business administrator and other municipal officials, it happened last June of 23. The township was locked out of its systems. And there, comments are made like the hackers take all the information they can, whatever's there. We don't know what they've taken. We've had to go back and scrutinize all the files. We just know what they had access to, right? So, again, we say all the time, if they are going to get their hands on your data and they feel like they can do something with it, they're going to take it before they deploy something like ransomware, right, guys? They look at it as like a smash and grab data theft. I think, Randy, you've used that term before on the show, right? And
spray.
So, they're calling the ransomware a cottage industry, what kind of is, because it's, it only occurs in a couple areas in the world. They go on and they say comments like, if you pay the ransom, there's a sort of honor code among thieves that the data will not be released publicly or sold on the dark web. This is coming from a special agent in charge of cyber crimes. And then they're using the ransom as their main ransom demand as their main business model. And if they feel like if they don't pay or they don't hold up their end of the bargain, then the ransomware loses its credibility. And then the chances of victims actually paying go down. as they work with these various cybersecurity people that come in after the event and stuff like that. And these guys have dealt with these groups in the past, and they'll sit there and they'll tell them like, hey, this group may or may not do what they say, right? So then that might put pause on whether a company actually pays the ransom. But as you know, they say in the article, these ransomware hackers, you know, are legit companies. It's not just one person behind a keyboard. So it's interesting, guys, like what this township kind of learned by going through a ransomware attack. Well, quite frankly, they could have just listened to our podcast and learned the same stuff, and they wouldn't have to go through a ransomware attack. But yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to just read through. You rarely get stories like this where you get a post-mortem and you get actual quotes from the people who were involved. And then you hear from the other side. You hear from, and you hear this a lot, guys. I actually heard a similar thing. You hear things like victims, you know, residents of this town, or with the Ascension ransomware attack, there was actually a patient in the hospital who was asking hospital staff, what's going on with my personal information? And these people are like, dude, what are you talking about right now? We're in the middle of like trying to get our hospital back up and running, and you want to know about your personal information? And it's kind of the same thing we're hearing here. It's like, when people want to know what happened to their personal information, the response that they're getting back from, and I got to believe that this goes back to, because we've seen it before in this industry, where companies are dealing with something for the first time, so they don't have a good process around it. They're not training their employees. So when a person is, you know, handed a situation where they're like, hey, somebody's asking about their personal information, what's happening with it, they're not trained to deal with that question. So they kind of get to choose how they want to deal with that situation. And a lot of times they're choosing what's kind of the wrong answer, right? They're being dismissive. They're like, you know, your concern is not my concern. I don't care about your personal information. I got to, you know, get a town back up and running, or a hospital back up and running. And that's what we're seeing a lot of. Like, we're seeing the customers of these organizations who want to know if their data is safe, basically just not only being blown off, but being kind of disrespected. And I think that's a big thing that companies are going to have to look at as part of the response piece of what they're doing, is to make sure that their staff is trained to deal with, you know, when they're asked about, you know, whether somebody's data was stolen and how to handle that situation. Because right now it's not being handled that well from what I can see. Do you guys see similar stuff happening there based on that? Because that's what I'm.
Yeah, this one lady, Sarah Avery, she's one of the residents that received the letter, and she called the phone number that says, if you have any questions about this breach, please give us a call. And when she calls, the operator on the line said they couldn't discuss any specifics of this matter, other than that the town has installed a firewall. So it's like, is that really what a resident wants to hear?
Man, I thought you were going to talk about a scam, because this would be a perfect opportunity for scammers, you know, maybe even send you a bill for the breach, you know, since I probably shouldn't say anything else. Don't want to give away any ideas, but then have a number to call. You know what I mean? Like, they could send out a letter that was fake. And like I said, I probably shouldn't give them any more ideas. So I'll shut
already doing it.
But
already doing it.
Just so much that can come out of all this.
Yeah, so it looks like it says, since the attack, the township hired Biff Duncan Associates to shore up its cybersecurity and conduct penetration testing, in quotes, to find lingering weaknesses, and instituted two-factor authentication for access to all municipal systems. So interesting. So, you know, it looks like a lot of things are happening here in this township that still, I think they're still, unfortunately, this is like indicative of an entity that just doesn't know how to handle an event like this. Their response, and they're hobbling through the back end of of this attack, which is that response phase. And you can tell they're hobbling through it. Not only did it seem like they hobbled through the whole entire thing, but they're still, having trouble dealing with all these questions. Seems like they did very little to protect their systems. And they're having a difficult time explaining to people what they've actually done to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I think that that's what Sarah Avery was trying to figure out. Like, what have you done to protect my information moving forward? I get that this happened, and they're basically being told, like, yeah, we installed a firewall. I mean, would that make you feel good? Would it make me feel good? So, all right, guys, I think that's it for today, right? I cover everything, or did I miss anything? We're all good? Great.
No, I mean, the only other point I would have made also on this whole thing about contacting this Biff Duncan Associates IT service provider is that if you're that size county or business that has that many employees, that shouldn't have been the time where you're calling someone to conduct the penetration testing and making sure that 2FF is on all of the systems. That should be something you're doing once every X amount of years.
That's it. Anything else, guys? All good? All right. Thanks for your input. We'll see everyone next week. Take care, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Take care.